All right, good morning. How was everyone? Hanging in there? Yeah. I was forced to exercise against my will this weekend. I don't often exercise, but I had to do a 9-hour soccer training. I'm going to be a soccer coach for my kids. And they were like, yeah, you're going to run. I was like, wait, I didn't sign up for this. I'm not getting paid for this. But luckily, there were some very, very overzealous to prove themselves people there who got to do most of the drills. I just stood back and watched. But that's my week. I had 9 hours of class on Saturday. So I kind of got that like, oh, that's what it's like to sit there. I was like, oh, this is brutal. 9 hours is a long time. But at least they gave us lunch. But yes, we're back. Week 2. Hopefully you're all hanging in there. We'll keep going with chapter 1 today. And we'll get through a little bit more of the how we viewed abnormality in the past. We spent a lot of time last time talking about these 5 Ds of abnormality, which again are kind of like a guideline, right, if you will, right? They're not diagnostic in any way, more of a guideline. If people have some of these Ds, we might wonder if there's something abnormal going on or atypical going on. And I put this up here as well, and we kind of, we're at the end of our time last time. But the DSM-5, and we'll talk about the DSM more later in the semester, had that statement. Again, you have to meet a lot of criteria in order to have a disorder. But these 5 Ds are kind of a great rough guideline, and it's almost never as clear as we think it is, which was hopefully a little bit of your takeaway from last time. And where we'll go from here is we'll talk a little bit about how we viewed abnormality in the past, but how we treated and viewed mental illness throughout time. And I'll just say this right off the bat, it's shameful. The things that we have done in the history of mental health treatment are cruel, dangerous. Oftentimes people died. They were really just awful, awful things because we didn't know, right? We didn't know how to treat mental illness for a long, long time. And so if we go back as far as we have like documented history, in the beginning of that, we saw mental illness as the work of demons, spirits, and magical beings. So if we go back like hundreds, if not thousands of years, people who had any kind of abnormal behavior were thought to be possessed, right? That it was the interaction of devils or the devil or demons of some sort that were kind of playing on the battleground that is the body and mind. And so what we would do is try and force those demons out of the body through things like trepanations and exorcisms. And again, a lot of people died in these procedures. They were violent. And sometimes people may have been genuinely possessed. It depends on the lens and your faith. A lot of people still believe in things like possession. But we're going to look at it more from like a psychological standpoint. And it was probably mental illness that we viewed through this lens. But trepanation was a very kind of old procedure that was practiced to drive the evil spirits out of the body. And literally cutting holes in people's skulls. And as I said, a lot of people died during these procedures, very brutal procedures. But it was thought that the demons could then escape through these small holes that we cut into the skull. More common than that, because those procedures tended to be so deadly, were things like exorcisms. Exorcisms where we get an old priest and a young priest, right? It's like the old formula. And then we drive or coax the evil spirits to leave a person's body through like a religious ritual. And as I mentioned, these were very, very common procedures. They're still done today, right? A lot of exorcisms were practiced in the past, even less so today, but it's featured in a ton of movies. I'm a huge horror movie fan. I think, as I mentioned on that first day, love the Conjuring movies. Like the last one is all about possession. There's even more, but these are some of the big ones featuring possessions and trying to coax the spirits out of the body. And a lot of these really interestingly feature a debate between, is it mental illness or possession? And a lot of that depends on the lens that you view it through. If you're a very religious person, you might believe in possession, right? Or believe in demons and evil spirits. If you're a very scientifically minded person, you might view it through the lens of mental illness and science. But a lot of these movies do feature themes of that. And I have a little excerpt from The Right, which is one, kind of an older one on the bottom here, where priest is training to become an exorcist. And they do have a little bit of this debate, right? Is it psychological, mental illness, or is it possession? And it's nothing too creepy. The guy does talk a little bit in like other languages on the recording, but nothing too scary, just in case it's not your. But let me play this little clip for you. And so that might be that you are hallucinating or hearing or seeing or believing things that aren't true. And so oftentimes there's this interesting overlap that we see between things like possession and mental illness, especially when we go to the psychotic disorders like schizophrenia. The exorcism of Emily Rose, another kind of older one, the whole thing is a trial trying to decide if she had schizophrenia or was possessed, right? And so again, just a common theme. And a lot of it comes down to lenses and beliefs, right? If you believe in possession, in theory, an exorcism could work, right, to cure a mental illness. It's that placebo effect, right? If you believe you were possessed and we perform a symbolic exorcism, you might get better, right? And so what is the harm, some would argue, in doing a procedure like that? And others viewing it through that lens of science, well, it'd be much more responsible to treat you with medications or therapy or something, recognizing the nature of that disorder. So just a really interesting topic, and we see this a lot throughout the history of mental illness, viewing it as the result of demons or spirits or the devil himself. Are any thoughts or comments or anything here? I don't ask you if you believe in demons, but like a lot of people do believe still in like this concept, or believe in the need for exorcisms. Definitely the right time of year to be watching these movies, at least. Very, very minute. Froze on me. It's a good slide to freeze on. Okay. As we move forward a little bit, right? So that's kind of the first thought, right? Was that it had to do with spirituality and possession. As we move forward just a little bit more, we see a little bit more of the role of like philosophers and physicians. Right, so looking at people like Hippocrates, who is often called the father of modern medicine, he proposed a very different take on mental illness. Rather than being spiritual in nature, he believed that mental illnesses, and maybe even all illnesses, right, had natural causes to them, physical causes. And we're going to look at different models of abnormality in chapter 2, but we're starting to already get to this thought that there can be different causes for mental illness. Hippocrates was well known for a lot of things, but one of them was he coined this idea that we all have 4 humors, or fluids, if you will, that flow through our body. And these 4 different humors or chemicals or fluids, he thought that they could influence our personality and our likelihood of getting mental illness, or like how it might manifest. And there really isn't a lot of like scientific evidence to back this up at all, but it was a very common perspective for years. And the way that he came up with this was he would remove blood from an individual, and then he would let it settle in like a vial or a beaker. And he would look at the proportions of how the blood separated. Right? If you let blood stand for a period of time, it separates into different layers. He added a 4th layer. There's typically only 3. But like if we looked at, like if I drew like a little beaker of some sort, it's not awful. I'm not very artistic, but that's not bad. But again, 4 layers. So what he would look at is yellow bile, black bile, blood, and phlegm. Okay. So it's not awful. We'll see how much phlegm you have to decide how much mental illness you have in life. But 4 different fluids, kind of based off of their colors. Bile is produced by the liver. Blood, phlegm, like snot, we'll say, or blood, phlegm or snot. But bile, you would look at yellow bile and black bile, right? Just different colors that you would see in this separation. And the yellow bile is at the top. And the yellow bile comes from, if we had to guess, it's like the yellow serum or the plasma that you would see if you let blood separate. And if somebody had too much yellow bile, right, he thought that they were very frenzied, right, which we might maybe describe as someone who had like ADHD, too much energy, unable to stay calm or calm down. And so depending on the concentration of these different things, it would correlate to different mental illnesses. And then there were treatments for them, which were typically quite brutal or awful, and people died during these as well. But yellow bile, frenzied activity, kind of like ADHD and maybe mania to a degree. Phlegm was underneath. Right? And the phlegm, right, it was thought to be like the white blood cells. So people who had too much phlegm or too much white blood cell concentration in their blood were thought to be lazy, right? They were maybe apathetic and tired and lazy. As a side note, and I won't ask you this, but the treatment for people having too much phlegm was therapeutic vomiting. We would induce vomiting to reduce the amount of phlegm, right? And again, every single one of these had like a treatment that went with them, often dangerous. They would have you ingest a bunch of different herbs to make you vomit, in the thought that it would reduce the phlegm and thereby reduce the laziness. Underneath that, we'd have blood. And this is the red blood cells. So if somebody had too much blood, it was thought that they were overly cheerful, right? Which we could equate to maybe mania, which we'll talk about in the mood disorders. And a very common treatment for people having too much blood was to bleed them, bloodletting. So we would put leeches on somebody to remove their blood, very, very dangerous thing to do, or we would therapeutically bleed them to reduce the amount of blood to thereby reduce the mania. Again, each one having its own like little treatment that went with it. And then on the bottom, we'd have the black bile. And this isn't a layer that you would typically see in blood. It's kind of just like that dark, sludgy bottom. It was a very small, thin layer at the bottom. But people who had too much black bile would have unshakable sadness or melancholy, right? And so again, with each one of these, by removing the blood and looking at how they kind of play out when it stands for a time, he would make theories about who would have different mental illnesses, how it would affect your personality types and the way that you behave and act. And then there were physical treatments that went with them. Again, completely kind of unfounded scientifically, but it was a huge shift from the idea that came before, that mental illness was caused by demons and possession. And as a side note, I love lists like this for short answer questions on exams, right? Like this would be a beautiful like short answer question. What are the 4 humors according to Hippocrates, right? I love those little like lists of 3 or 4 or 5. So you could star it or circle it or tattoo it or whatever you want to do, right? But this would be a great short answer question first exam. As we get into the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, we go back to spirituality and demonology. The Middle Ages and the Renaissance were very dominated by a lot of religion, especially the Middle Ages and the Dark Ages before it. And so what we see is that the church had an incredible amount of power, especially in Europe. And so we go back to this idea that people who have like any kind of mental illness were possessed by the devil, specifically the devil, Satan himself, right, would possess you. And so a lot of the treatments went back to things like exorcisms, Treponations. We also saw a lot of like witch hunts happening during this time, where we'd put people in the impossible scenario, which is what's happening here, where they would put typically women on a chair and they would drown them. If they drowned, they weren't a witch. If they didn't drown, they were a witch, and then they would kill them, right? So there was really no way to win that scenario, right? I mean, lose. But oftentimes, looking at things like demonology and possession as a cause for mental illness, typically things like schizophrenia, where people were maybe hallucinating or having delusional beliefs. As we get into the Renaissance was much more of a period of like rebirth, a little bit more like positive in nature. And we moved away from things like demonology and bizarre treatment methods that were very common during that time to a new invention that was meant to revolutionize mental health treatment. A doctor named Dr. Johann Weyer came up with something that he called the Asylum. The asylum was supposed to be a very nice, calm, peaceful place that people went to get better. It had good intentions, right? His thought was that we could put you out in the country in a big, quiet home where you could be peaceful and recover. Now, when you think of an asylum, you probably don't think of that, right? Like, what do you picture in your mind when you picture an asylum? Like, what images come to mind? Yeah. Okay, chains and dark, for sure. There was another hand, yeah. Okay, right, like a white padded room, right? Straight jackets, right? Yeah. Spooky, creepy, right? Like American. Dark, dangerous, right? Not somewhere that you would want to be. Filthy, awful conditions. People went into asylums and they died and rotted away in their own filth. They almost became warehouses or jails for people who had mental illness. Again, they had good intentions. It just, we had no idea how to care for people who had mental illness. And so oftentimes people were put into like bizarre, almost cribs like this, where they were locked into cribs. They were put in chairs where they were spun into circles until they passed out, bled with leeches and other methods. They were just awful, bizarre, dangerous, and deadly treatments that happened in these asylums that, again, started with very good intentions. The idea was that we could put people somewhere like respectful and quiet and peaceful, but that's not at all what they became. And the most famous, or I should say most infamous, of these asylums was a place called Bethlehem Hospital in London. Bethlehem Hospital is one of the largest and first asylums, and it's still around today, though it's changed quite a bit and many times, the many fires and changes over the years. But Bethlehem became known later as Bedlam. The name changed from Bethlehem to Bethlehem to Bedlam. And Bedlam means chaos or madness. So this hospital kind of became synonymous with people being like mad or insane for the first time. It was a place for the insane population to go. And many of these asylums, especially ones like Bedlam, were massive. Just these absolutely massive, massive buildings where people were, again, kind of locked away, and we had no idea how to help them. And there was a huge documentary made about this. I have just like a little excerpt from it back before this burned down and was converted. But let me show you a little excerpt from the documentary. It's about 2 minutes long. I'm going to show you some images and talk about it just a little bit. Hospitals were just absolutely massive, massive buildings that held thousands and thousands of people with bad conditions, poor funding, and no idea how to help individuals who were there. But Bethlehem or Bedlam, as it became, was one of the most famous of these places. If we move into like a little bit forward, the 19th century, we started to get some better attitudes and conditions in the 1800s. There was a shift that happened where we had this idea, and it was revolutionary and controversial at the time, of something called moral treatment. What if, instead of just locking people away in these massive asylums, we try and treat people who have mental illness with a degree of respect and morality? And this was something that, again, was very controversial for years. A lot of people believing that people who had mental illness didn't deserve those conditions. Or how do we give somebody who's insane those conditions? But this was a very big shift that happened in the 1800s. And so what came out of this was this idea of the state hospital, kind of like the asylum, but it would be run by each state or by smaller like governing bodies. And it would be driven by moral treatment. So the state hospital, again, massive buildings, would be offering moral treatment. Patients who were there would have responsibilities and social like obligations. They would be given a quality of life that wasn't present before. Unfortunately, these state hospitals that were intended to offer moral treatment ran into a lot of the same issues that asylums did, right? We still didn't know how to treat people. We still didn't have enough money or staffing. We didn't know how to cure people, right, of mental illnesses. And so while they were a little bit better, a lot of these places still had the same problems, but state hospitals was a big shift, trying to give people, again, some of those rights and privileges and social kind of interactions to help them. And there's a couple of kind of cool paintings and images that came out of this time. Here's one of them. One of the people who was a big proponent of moral treatment, his name was Philippe Pannell. And Pannell believed in removing the to be in the 1800s, but he would remove the chains from his patients. He believed in talking to them. He would visit with his patients and clients and just talk to them and record what was going on, right? One of the first people to try and do that, rather than doing bleeding and starvation and all these like bizarre treatments. He believed that madness was more of a disease and that people who had it deserved a degree of morality and a degree of respect and treatment. So a very famous image that came out of the time of like removing those chains and trying to treat people a little bit more humanely. The other one is a piece of art called a Dance in a Madhouse, portraying the lunatic ball. As part of the moral treatment wave, what they often did was throw these massive, like parties, these massive like social parties for the people who were in these institutions. And you can see that they're portraying these people as being mentally ill. Their faces are all like disfigured, which was a very common way of portraying them. But having these massive parties where the patients would get to dance with each other and socialize and form romantic relationships. I always think it would have been so fun to be like a fly on the wall at one of these dances. Like it would just how fascinating that would be at the time, the 1800s. But it's a very famous piece of art that came out of that era, portraying the lunatic ball as a part of this moral treatment wave. I found a cool video on YouTube, and it's just like a random collection of things, but moral treatment started to run into some issues. Oops, sorry, let me go back here. Moral treatment started to run into the same issues, as I said, that asylums did. And a lot of these massive state hospitals ran out of funding and they became abandoned, some of them almost overnight, right? And so there are still a lot of these places around today, these massive, massive buildings. Cal State Channel Islands used to be a psychiatric facility. I've never been out there, but I've often had students tell me there's buildings that are still like boarded up. Is that true still? Right? It makes me want to go out there. I don't know if I take my kids, but it makes me want to go. One of my first jobs that I ever had, and I was a volunteer, I didn't get paid, was I worked as basically a runner in a psychiatric hospital in San Diego. So I would sit in on group therapy sessions, and if somebody needed something, I'd go get it, right? But I got to partake in all these sessions. That hospital is now a YMCA, which is so weird, but people are like working out in the rooms that used to be doing group therapy in. I also went to, as part of college, I went to an abandoned psychiatric hospital up in Northern California. It was converted into a Buddhist monastery, which is really like, even the monks said they couldn't clear some of the energy in some of the buildings. So we went there. I took a 1-unit class called Buddhism. It was like a study of Buddhism. And as part of the class, we went to this monastery for a weekend. We got to stay overnight and pray with the monks. It was really unique. I'm not an overly religious person, so I thought it would be a great like boundary pushing kind of thing. And I didn't know it was an abandoned psychiatric hospital until I got there. So creepy. I have to tell you, I slept like not at all that whole trip. We were in this building that used to be a dorm for people who were in this psychiatric hospital, and it looked like it. Lime green bathroom walls, everything was old. We were in these old cots that were clearly like old hospital beds. Like it was terrifying and fascinating at the same time. And I felt so lucky because they separated the men and women so we wouldn't be tempted. I was with my partner in a room, so I felt safe, which is thank God, because it was like such a creepy place to be. And so fascinating. There's these places all over the country that were these massive buildings that were abandoned or converted into other places as we moved into like smaller treatment modalities. And I found a little of like old abandoned psychiatric hospitals across the country. And it's set to like a Radiohead song, which seems fitting. But I'll play this for you. Treatments in these facilities were just so dangerous and bizarre. And yet they started to, of course, fall out of favor by like the 1980s, 1990s. There weren't that many of these places left. A lot of them, as I mentioned, just kind of converted or repurposed or just abandoned. These massive, massive buildings across the country. And these have been featured in just an absolute ton of like movies and shows. Psychiatric hospitals from Shutter Island is probably one of the more like commonly referenced ones. American Horror Story, really newer one called Unsane, which we can talk about a little bit in the forensic psychology unit at the end. Old classic, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. If you've never seen that, it's like an old psychology classic you have to watch at some point. Session 9, Gothica, House on Haunted Hill, Girl Interrupted, 12 Monkeys, kind of a funny story. There's a bunch of these, so many, and there's more, but featuring these different psychiatric hospitals and facilities in different ways. Sometimes they're like old and creepy and haunted. Other times they're more like for the criminally insane or a little bit more like modern. But as I mentioned, a lot of these kind of falling out of favor, a different emphasis as we've gotten more into like the 90s and 2000s. Any, I'm just going to go back here. Any thoughts or comments or questions or anything? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
My aunt actually works there for like years, and she quit eventually. She has like the craziest stories about how some of the treatments that were just like a little too
right. And they really were. I mean, they were completely messed up at the time, right? I mean, people often really did die during these procedures or just, not get better at the very least. And it's wild if you go back like 30, 40, 50 years, and you see this in American Horror Story, right? Like in the second season, I mean, you could have somebody committed for nothing. Like a husband, traditionally, like a man could have his wife committed for no reason whatsoever. And they would go in there and it would end up with like electroconvulsive therapy and shock therapy and just all these awful treatments for really nothing. And we didn't know if they worked. We didn't know what we were doing. We've come a long way. The idea of therapy is such a revolution compared to some of the stuff that happened in the past. Yeah.
I wonder, even now, how many of our treatment practices are going to become outmoded.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of relatives, myself, I've been, 5150 before, and like, I think it's called Aurora Vista Del Mar. There's another one in Northridge, and over the years, you kind of keep up with these things. You hear different stories about people being mistreated in wards, sort of unethical treatment plans as far as people getting like serotonin sickness or just simply going off the rails because the doctor was a little bit too giddy with the medications. And psychiatry and just therapy in general, they're very, very young in a way. So hoping it continues to improve.
Yeah, right. Therapy's only been around about 100 years, a little more than 100 years, right? Which isn't that long in the scope of things, right? And it's constantly evolving and changing, right? There was a time where when Freud proposed talk therapy, talking to people were like, well, why would that help? Right? Like, what would that do? No, let's just do a lobotomy and bleed them and, lock them in these bizarre things. That'll treat them way faster. Right. And Freud was like, no, we can talk to people and hypnotize them and look at the unconscious, and that'll be helpful. Right. And I imagine years from now, they're going to be like, talk therapy. Like, what a waste. Like, all we have to do is this. Right. As we develop, newer methods of brain stimulation and newer medications. Right. I was just reading an article the other day about how there's a lot of evidence to support something that we've thought we've known for years might not be true, right? That we've thought for years that depression is exclusively or almost exclusively the result of things like serotonin and dopamine and other like neurotransmitters, that there isn't as much evidence to support that as we once thought, right? And so, it's constantly evolving. Like one day, I'm sure they'll look back and be like, oh, yeah, why did we waste so much time talking to people? Therapy, what a waste, right? But right now, therapy and medication are some of the most common ways of treating mental illness.
Yeah.
That wasn't the case.
Definitely not, I think, or far more.
No.
Than not.
Yeah, but there's definitely room for improvement, right? And a lot of the newer types of therapy are less talk-based, right? So therapy traditionally for the last like 100 years has been you go in and you talk to somebody and you work through things through talking. There's a lot of new brain-based therapies where we're doing things like EMDR, gaining a lot of like, we'll talk about that later, gaining a lot of popularity, different like brain stimulation things within therapy to make it work faster and more differently on a like neurological level. So yeah, I hope we continue to learn. Every so often we come up with new things and it changes the whole field, right? And so yeah, we're constantly learning and growing. Any other thoughts, comments, stories, questions, anything? Yeah.
My takeaway on all this is like, even 2 slides ago, if you think that there were so many people with mental illness in London 300 years ago,
Yeah.
that they could fill this huge hospital.
Sure.
You know, I mean, well, this person, this border of London, that can really eccentric. And so it's just, for me, it's just culturally, it's just so unfinished.
Right.
Everything where everyone has the best of intentions for all these decades, even a couple of centuries, and we still don't know.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
There's so much that we don't.
But I sort of have a glass half full. It's like, we're out there trying. We're out there trying. We're trying to have facilities. We're trying to, you know, so that's the way that it is. It's kind of humble.
Yeah, and it's there's so many things where we sleep a third of our life. If you sleep 8 hours a night, a third of your life. Just let that like sink in for a minute. Like some of us sleep way more than that, right? Or way less, sadly. And we know nothing about sleep. We don't know what dreams are, where they come from, right? We know very little about sleep, like so little, and like there's so little we know about a lot of these things that we're talking about in this class. There's just so much room, right, for growth and knowledge and improvement. Right? I don't know if it'll ever be finished. There's a lot of ways to go. Did you have a?
Yeah, maybe I'm wrong. Isn't stuff like ECG still today?
Yeah, right. Electroconvulsive therapy is still used today. There are newer methods that are starting to gain popularity, but that's the old standard, right? It is definitely still used. Shocking, right? That's I don't know. Yeah, and we still use it today. But there's something called TMS, which we'll talk about, transcranial magnetic stimulation, which is gaining popularity. It's way less invasive, but a lot of people still go through electroconvulsive therapy, shock therapy. Yeah.
So when they do go to therapy, is it like, do they give consent?
Yeah, you can force it on somebody. In the past, it was forced on people. Right. Yeah, now you would give consent, or if you're not able to, you will never give consent for you. But yeah, it's an outpatient procedure. It's definitely used, but not forced. Yeah, in the past, it was done against your will in these facilities, but that's not. Anybody else? Any other thoughts, questions, anything?
One last footnote about.
Yeah.
Computers, where, I always love all the, well, like the crazy, like even the non-invasive sort of ways that
Sure.
they balance those, sort of things, like, you know, putting lead in their wine and whatnot, but I have never known about, you know, with the white peers, how that was correlated with, these sort of lethargic symptoms, and, you know, abundance of white blood cells that could be something like hemolysis or anemia or something. But,
Right.
you know,
That probably has some kind of interesting physical correlate to it medically, right? It's just interesting. Yeah, there's so much, you know, ideas that were like, you know, like you said, like good natured in a way. Like you hope that they were good natured. Some of them led to good things, and some of them led to pretty awful things. But it's all gotten us to where we are today. These are some of the big things now, right? Current trends. If we get to now, medication, right? Deinstitutionalization, therapy, and prevention. So we have a very strong culture of medication, right? There's a medicine for everything and a medication for the side effects for that medicine. right? There's a lot of different medications, and we'll talk about those throughout the semester, all the different medications that you can take for mental illness. A very, very big trend. A lot of people take medication for mental illness. Deinstitutionalization, this was something that started back in like the 80s and 90s of closing those massive facilities in favor of more like private therapy, right? People going to therapy either with one therapist or like even group therapy, but smaller scale, rather than being institutionalized, locked away. Now people tend to go to therapy for 50 minutes or so. The therapy hour is 50 minutes. And then you go home, right? And maybe you see someone once a week or every other week or ever so often. Maybe you see someone online, right? Therapy virtually has been huge these last couple of years. As you know, we struggled with COVID, a lot of people met with therapists virtually, either on the phone or like through some kind of FaceTime like technology. But we use a lot of cyber therapy that gained popularity in like the early 2000s and even more so right now. And the therapists are notoriously overwhelmed right now. The demand for therapy right now is so high because there's a lot of anxiety in the world. Those last 2 years, there's been a lot of demand for therapy not being able to keep up. We also focus a lot on prevention, trying to identify things early and catch them before they become an issue. What are some of the warning signs and how can we identify and stop it early, right? So if we're starting to see things in someone, can we get them help before it escalates? It's a really big focus of kind of this field right now is identifying stuff early and treating it before it becomes like a full-blown disorder. Just as there's disagreement on what it defines abnormality, there's disagreement on what defines treatment. Treatment is an incredibly broad term, right? And there are so many different types of treatment, and we'll talk about them throughout the semester. One clinician, a guy named Jerome Frank, kind of boiled down all treatments to have 3 basic elements. And this is kind of like those D's of abnormality. This is a guideline for treatment. When we talk about treatment for mental illness, you have someone who's suffering, who seeks relief from a healer. That is so broad. But the nice part about that is a healer could be someone like a medical doctor. It could be a therapist. It could be a priest or a shaman or a religious figure. It's anyone that you accept as being able to help you, which is number 2. Someone who is a socially accepted healer, you accept their experience as being helpful for you. So maybe you believe that going to your family doctor would be the best way to get help. That person could be a healer, or it could be a therapist, or again, like a counselor or a priest. It could be anyone that you accept having knowledge that could be helpful to you. And then there's a series of contacts between the healer and the sufferer in which we try and produce changes. So we'll talk about lots of different types of treatment throughout the semester, whether it's medication or therapy or different brain stimulation methods or alternate treatments like EMDR that I mentioned a moment ago. There's just as much disagreement on how we define treatment as there is for how we define like what is a disorder and what's abnormal. Lots and lots of different approaches, which again, we'll talk about throughout the semester. Anyone in here thinking of having a career, something related to abnormal psychology? Show of hands. Ooh, lots of you. Anyone thoughts as to what? I won't hold you to it. You can change it. Yeah.
Research neuroscience.
Okay.
Was it doing like Alzheimer's?
Nice. Okay. Wonderful. Anyone else? Yeah.
I was actually thinking of getting into Untitled.
Okay. All right.
Chapter.
Nice. Interesting. I love reading children. One of my favorite things. Yeah.
So I think we would be on the therapist versus
Okay. Therapist or social worker. Anybody else? Yeah. Okay. Nice. Love it. Yeah. Okay. All right. So like a behavioral assistant. Okay. Anybody else? Yeah.
Neuroscience with children.
Nice. Okay. Look, if we hook up and talk about neuroscience. Was that a hand?
Yeah.
Maybe.
No, victimized between specifically with see.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. And I'm kind of I'm like a CPTSD expert a little bit. That's kind of like an area I find really interesting. Anybody else? Other thoughts? A lot of jobs in this discipline, so many, right? And I have some of the big ones up here, but there are just an absolute ton of careers that you can have related to psychology. And this might be a little bit of a side note, but I have a master's in counseling psych. That's my educational background. So I have an MA, it was a 2 to 3 year program. And so I was a counseling psychologist, or in California, we call them an MFT, marriage and family therapist. Trainee, I never took the test. I only did only 1,500 hours only. But you can be a marriage and family therapist with a master's degree. You can be a social worker, a researcher, a school psychologist. I was an EOPS and academic counselor for years. I've been a professor with my master's degree. A lot of the degrees in psychology, or the careers, are very degree dependent. You need a master's or a PhD or even a PsyD. You need a lot of education to do a lot of the things many of you mentioned. But one interesting distinction, clinical versus counseling versus psychiatry. They tend to be really confused. And so I just want to take a minute to kind of talk about the differences. A clinical psychologist tends to be somebody who has a PhD, right? So they've gone to school for like 5 to 7 years, maybe more. That's before internships and so on. And they tend to work with people who have more like severe mental illness. They do a lot of assessment and diagnosis and treatment. They make more than their counseling psychologist counterparts. Counseling psychologists tend to have a master's degree, which is like 2 to 3 years on average. They deal more with like everyday kind of issues like anxiety, relationships, communication, depression. The work that those two do tend to be very similar. 50 minutes, meeting with a client, employing a variety of techniques. Psychiatrists, though, are very different. What's the difference between a psychiatrist and the other two? Yeah. Yeah, was that what your thought too? You had it? Right. Yeah, they have a medical degree, right? An MD, they can prescribe medication. Psychiatrists tend to have a very different focus. If you go see one of them, it's usually about 20 minutes. They don't so much do therapy as much as it's how are you doing? How are you tolerating the medications that you're on? Maybe a little bit of checking in, but typically someone might see a psychiatrist and one of the first two, right? Who you would traditionally call like a therapist or a counselor. And you might see both, right? And a psychiatrist has a lot of education, again, a medical degree, and tend to be much shorter, more focused appointments, typically around medication. A little bit of therapy, but not usually. School psychologists have a master's degree. They tend to work in the school settings, right? Assessing students, aptitude tests, intelligence tests, helping people in the school setting, typically through like 12th grade or so through high school. Social workers also typically have a master's degree, and they're licensed social workers, if you've ever heard that term, working with the institutions of society. So oftentimes workers coordinating of services and getting people connected to what they need. You can be a researcher, a therapist, a teacher. There's so many different things that you can do. Forensic psychology is very popular. Nobody mentioned that necessarily, but a lot of people go to work in like a forensic capacity. But there are so many different things you can do. And it's interesting, there's a lot of stereotypes of therapy, right? So many stereotypes of therapy. And what I want you to do just for a minute, I want you to find a few people around you, like 3, 4 people, whatever's easy. It could be the same people from last time, or you can find new people. It's totally up to you. But go ahead and find a few people, introduce yourself, and then I'll tell you what I want you to talk about just for a moment. Find like 3 or 4 people, whatever's easy around you. You might jot it down, you can share. You're not turning to this, you might have something written down. I want you to think about any stereotypes, associations. What comes to mind when you think of therapy, therapists, people who go to therapy? Like, for example, like the hallmark stereotype, the big one, right? Is something a therapist might say, like, how does that make you feel? Said it once in therapy, and then I would like apologize. I was like, I'm sorry, it was so therapist-y of me, right? Like, how does that make you feel? Would be like one of the biggest stereotypes of like something a therapist might say. So you could think about, what does a stereotypical therapist look like? You could think of their office, you could think of people who go, anything that comes to mind related to therapy, therapists, people who go to therapy, and so on. And just jot it down so we can share and talk about it. So I'll give you a few minutes as a group. The children talk about it.
I guess what you're saying that. Everybody's mad.
Talk about it together. I was thinking, I was laughing in my head, so the follow-up, just to decide, the follow-up stereotype to how that make you feel is tell me more about it.
Yeah.
That's the other phrase, like, how does it make you feel, and tell me more about it, right? Those are like the two hallmark things, but what else did you cover? Give me one thing, something new. Yeah, sure.
And obviously this is not happening in those people, but basically they cross their legs, they have their little notebook in their hand. And literally anything you say, this is write down and raise their eyebrows.
Okay. I like it, right? Legs crossed, note taking, raise the eyebrows. Yeah. Yeah.
What if they sit at a specific type of chair, it like kind of leans back, it has like a little like thing in front of it, but not really.
Okay.
It's a little wonky.
Uh-huh.
Like white and tan
Okay.
for some reason.
All right. And then what's the counterpart for the clients? What does the client sit on?
The couch.
A couch, right? I'll show you the couch that started it all. Freud was the one who started the idea of the couch. I'll show you this first couch looked awful and uncomfortable, like really bad, like a weird like round couch kind of thing, right? I always picture a couch in there somewhere. What else? Yes.
I was gonna say, every time you see like a little comic strip where it's like the punchline has to do with therapy,
Yeah.
they always draw the dude exactly like Superman.
Yeah, right. It's always like an older bearded guy, right?
Yeah.
So I always picture a woman for some reason with like a stereotypical bed. Yeah, it depends, right? Like it might be, I always picture something older. Either way, they have glasses when I picture them, right? Yeah.
Sometimes like that's a stereotype, like when comes to be
Okay. Yeah, right, like traditional, like therapy, what's in the office? What else is in the office? Like there, tissues, there's gotta be tissues in there, you just try, right? Yeah, they're different,
some of their family.
yeah, oh, a dish, right? Do you picture anything else in the room? Like a couch and stuff, yeah? Yeah, right, this place is safe. I picture debris on the wall or like a garden, like a rock garden or a fountain of some sort, yeah. 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 Okay, all right, so picture that. I like that. What else do they do, or what else do you picture or think of or associate? Yeah.
When I had therapy, my therapist had a TV in the room and we played Wii tennis.
Okay. Nice. Okay, well, that sounds amazing, right? Get to play video games and have snacks. I like it. Anybody else? Other stuff you? Yeah, yeah.
I don't know. I always feel like they always have this specific candle
Okay.
that's like always burning. Never like never ever cease.
Okay.
But it's always lit.
The never ending candle. Okay, I like that. Okay, other things that you picture, associate with therapy? Yeah.
They always got a white coffee mug on their desk.
Okay, white coffee mug. I like that too. Right?
The couch that I have to sit on is always like dark green.
Okay, dark green. I like that too. All right, Freud's was red. Okay, so what about people who go to therapy? And what any stereotypes? Instant thoughts, like, what's wrong with it, right? Like if somebody's going to therapy, they must have a disorder. Wrong. Any other stereotypes about people who go to therapy? Or like the people on the client side? Yeah,
We can solve their own problem.
yeah. Or you need somebody else to solve them for you. Anything else in general? I always picture, we were talking about this, I pictured the therapist taking notes and being like a bobblehead, like,
Yeah.
or tell me more. Just like, over and like, as a baby, I'm pretty sure I was analyzing lots. Like I cried and pointed at one, like and he went to therapy since I was a baby, and like I absolutely couldn't stand it. And then I became a therapist and a psychologist. So I mean, obviously, like that instilled something somewhere. So I still go to therapy. I have my whole life, and so like I go now. I always think of self-care. My therapist is always like, practice self-care. I roll my eyes every time, like self-care. Okay, but she misspelled it once in an email and wrote self-cake. And I thought it was on purpose. She's like, don't forget to practice self-cake over the weekend. It's like, I do that. So every time she says practice self-care, I'm like, you mean self-cake, right? Like, I think that anyway. But I always think of self-care. I always think that another common stereotype, people become therapists because they have issues themselves. I don't know if anyone talked about that or thought of that. Sometimes that's true. Having some background of dealing with, psychological struggles might make you a really good therapist, as long as it doesn't interfere, right? Like you don't want to have it where like, oh, you think you have problems? Let me tell you about mine. That would be a lot. But there are a lot of mixed attitudes about going to therapy. Anyone come from a family or a culture that has really negative attitudes about therapy? Just by show of hands. Yeah, like what? What are some of the negative, like you shouldn't go because, or what are some of the negative things? Yeah.
Well, I went to counseling as a child.
Yeah.
And we would tell my dad everything, and this person that would like turn it around and
Sure.
share on us. So it's like constantly.
Yeah, right. Well, if you can't trust that what you say is safe, right? Yeah.
Obviously, very old school, family member, well, the only reason you go is to be crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not crazy.
Sure.
Ironically, now with hindsight, that family member is like, you should have been on the couch. But yes, no. Well, why would one go? Crazy people. And then so that they couldn't turn the corner that would be helpful.
Okay.
And you know what I mean? And the too many fences up. I'm not crazy, therefore I'll never go.
Right. Okay. Really common stereotype. Yeah.
My dad is in therapy, and he says it's a waste of money.
Sure.
It can be very expensive for a private
Yes.
therapy.
You
And
can.
I'm just like, oh, it's just talking, like, what does that do?
Right.
Again, when it's talking.
Yeah. A lot of people believe that it's a waste of time, and it can be very expensive if your insurance doesn't cover it. I mean, it can add up, especially if you're going to like long-term care.
I want to say this for all Middle Easterners, but my parents immigrated to the US.
Sure.
In the 70s after a revolution in their home country. And they don't believe that anything we're dealing with is hard or traumatic.
Sure.
And because they were able to cope with it, whether that's the case or not, we should be able to too.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a sign of weakness.
Yeah.
to go to therapy.
I'm glad you shared that. There's a lot of like cultural beliefs around that. My partner comes from a very Hispanic, like traditional Catholic family, and like they do not believe in therapy. Like I remember when I met them, they're like, you just talk to people for a living. I'm like, well, it's a little more than that. Like it's complicated. But my partner has like such a negative view of therapy, right? Like I looked around like somehow I was gonna get in trouble for saying that. But like she always has this like mentality of like it's a complete waste of time and just get over it. Like just stop it. Like that old like you're right, like the Bob Newhart or whatever. He's like, just stop it. It's like an old thing of like, you're depressed, just stop it, right? Like cut it out. Like you don't need to go to therapy, just stop. Right? A lot of cultural beliefs and negative attitudes about therapy, that it's a waste of time, a waste of money, but the therapists only care about money themselves. Right. And of course there are bad therapists, they're bad, they're bad at everything, right? But a lot of therapists do care. Yeah. Go back there.
I can do it myself.
Yeah.
I was very like, I can do it myself.
Sure.
Wanting to make it, so I got an after that, and then I started to do a lot safer and,
Sure.
and find the pockets.
Yeah, right. If you know yourself, you don't need a screener. You don't need a screener. You got a lot.
My previous partner was Salvadorian, and they were of the complete same school of thought
Yeah.
where, you know, they essentially thought that people with mental illness, that everybody else had the same problems as them, but for some reason that they did not have the fortitude to like actually deal with it. So that's-
Yeah.
Also, parents will be people who like, oh, you're ungrateful, your life's not good enough or something.
Yeah.
So, oh, when I was your age, I had to do this, or I walked to the snow. Like,
Both ways barefoot in the snow to
Yeah.
school, right? Logistically impossible, but yes, right? Totally, it's that, I could see that, and I've seen that a lot. It's funny, my daughter Emma, they had a therapist come into their school last week, which is growing in popularity, like, so she's in 3rd grade. Showed you a picture of her, right? She had a therapist come into their room, and the therapist basically walked in and introduced herself and was like, so if any of you want to come like talk to me, like I'm here, you know, and you can come talk to me. And my daughter, like coming from a house where like I'm very pro therapy, obviously, like her mom is not as much, but still, she's like, I want to talk, and went to therapy that day. And like, and my partner was like, why did you go to therapy? Like, it's for people with issues. And I'm like, no, it doesn't have to be. Like they have a little, but like a little issue on that one. But my daughter went and she's just like, well, you know, she just said I could talk to her. I like to talk, you know, and, you know, and so like, it's so interesting. There's obviously a huge range. A lot of people benefit from therapy. A lot of people are believers in therapy, and a lot of people don't, right? Believe in it or feel like it can be harmful, or all these stereotypes we just talked about. Lots of different types of therapists. We'll talk about the techniques that they oftentimes will use. But just as one quick side note, and then I'll take attendance. If you've heard the term shrink before, right? Like we often refer to therapists as shrinks. It's a really like negative, if you didn't know the like history behind it, it originates from the term head shrinker. And it's a disparaging reference comparing the practice of therapy to the primitive tribal practice of shrinking the heads of your enemy. That's like a very common cultural belief around therapy, right? That again, it tends to be unhelpful or negative. And obviously it helps a lot of people. So we'll kind of talk about both sides of that, the pros and cons of everything as we go through. But that is our last slide then for chapter 1. I want to take attendance really quick, but I'll give you a moment if you need to get back to your spot or pack up. Then we'll take attendance and call it a day.
Yeah.